traumas que afrontan los indocumentados, violencia doméstica, el porqué de la violencia en las escuelas. Llámanos en vivo al 1-888-900-2811, extensión 6, y haz tus preguntas al aire. ¡Comenzamos!
Good evening, my dear viewers. Buenas noches, queridos televidentes. Today is March 19th. We're broadcasting from New York, 9 p.m. Estamos hoy día, marzo 19, a las 9 p.m. En Nueva York and Long Island. I wanted just to preface at the start that this is my 31st show. Este es el número 31. I did want to say, however, that it's probably the saddest, yet probably the most important show I'm doing because it deals with this horrific coronavirus pandemic, this horrible coronavirus crisis that we're having. So les dejo saber que a la vez es un show para mí el más triste que he hecho hasta ahora, pero también pienso que sería o será hasta esta fecha el más importante porque el tema abarca esta crisis de coronavirus. So it's a sad but very important topic. I also did want to share that I realize that we have been inundated over and over and over again with news broadcasts about the pandemic, where the number of countries, the number of states, the number of people who have contracted coronavirus, sadly, people who have lost their lives to coronavirus. Las noticias constante, un influjo constante de reportaje negativo de todo lo malo de este coronavirus, de los números, los países, los continentes, lamentablemente los perecidos. And I know that you've gotten it over and over again. And I didn't want to do a show to give you more of that. What I wanted to do with the show today was really give you more anchors of hope. I wanted to give you a sense of how people are feeling and what are some of the things, strategies that we can do to cope. We're in this, for better or for worse, we are in this. So we do have to go ahead and go forward. So what would be the best ways? What in our lives can we do to try to go ahead and come out of this as best as possible? And I recognize as well as a psychologist that people are suffering. They're suffering emotionally. They're suffering from all sorts of shortages and fear factor and things that have been impacting them, or loved ones or families or people living in other countries or other states, and they see how they are impacted. And it's like really a horrible emotional state that we are in. And as a human being, I also do want to share that I've had my share of feeling anxious. I'm not above feeling nervous. I tend to handle stress well, but I am concerned and worried. And I know that I'm feeling this personally. How is it not possible for just about everybody else on this planet not to in some way be reacting emotionally? And this is really what I wanted to get to tonight. I wanted to give the viewers a sense that there are people out there who do understand what you're feeling, even if we haven't necessarily gone through exactly what you're going through. But we're trying to sympathize and empathize. We care. We're there to try to help you and reach out for you. And I did want to share that with you. So I wanted to say as well that we have a wonderful guest. We have the title. Let me start with the title. The show's actually called Contagion Fear: The Psychological Consequences of Coronavirus. And in Spanish, the name of the show is Miedo al Contagio: Las Consecuencias Psicológicas del Coronavirus. So we're really focusing on the fear of the contagion. This is really what Dr. Anthony, I'm going to call him Tony Puente, who's been a guest before, and I will be going over today for the next hour. We have had my guest, Dr. Puente, as a guest before, and I did want to share with you a few words about him. He is a past president of the American Psychological Association. He's a recipient of the APA's Distinguished Professional Contributions to Independent Practice. In 2011, he's traveled all over the world. He's published numerous articles and books. He is certainly eminently qualified to talk on this subject. I don't know if you recall, some of the regular viewers might recall that it was several months ago that we were talking about the trauma in the face of natural disasters, and he had talked about, I believe it was the effects of a ravaging hurricane where he lives and how it impacted him and so forth. So I did want to share that with you. I'm going to have Dr. Puente say a few words. I'm going to call Tony. I'm going to call you Tony. I'm sorry, I can't. It's hard for me to use the last name all the time. You're Tony. So as I've done before, puedes poner el primer slide. Oscar, say hello to everybody.
Hello.
We have Oscar as part of the crew, and Oscar is valiantly here recording, and we're really trying to do the best that we can to serve the public. So, ¿tienes el primer slide?
Yeah.
As I've done before, I did want to give you my sense of my inspiration for why I wanted to do this show. Like others, when I first heard about coronavirus, it was so far away and scanty information was coming through that I didn't give it much thought. Then it seemed to be something perhaps like another type of flu. By the time thousands were quarantined off the coast of Japan on the cruise ship, the Diamond Princess, in February, that's just last month, I knew this was very serious. Coronavirus brought me back full circle to my days working at Kingsborough Psychiatric Center. Just to give you an idea, I was there in the 70s, in the late 70s, early 80s, when we first learned about this dreadful disease called AIDS. And the fear factor, misinformation, climate of hate and vilification, and search for a cure were part of my apprehension and existence for years to come. My wife, Irma, a nurse, worked at an AIDS nursing home for 5 years. I remember the challenges she faced and the courage she showed caring for her very ill AIDS patients. As we now cope with the coronavirus pandemic, I'm amazed again at the dedication of the nurses and doctors and medical personnel who risk exposure to work with coronavirus patients, even in the face of shortages of space and supplies and risk to themselves. They are the true heroes in this crisis. It is for them and for my nurse, Irma, that I dedicate this show to those who are suffering and whose lives have been disrupted. I offer my hope that we will find a silver lining and recover and emerge stronger. I would also like to share with you that after writing this inspiration, I thought that I needed as well to acknowledge law enforcement, transit workers, all out there who are providing a public service, keeping us safe, mobile, and helping take care of us. So thank you, all the workers and all the healthcare workers, for putting yourselves out there for us. So, puedes poner la pantalla, Tony. So, Tony, thank you for being here. I'm just going to say a few words about you, and then feel free to greet the viewers. And if I miss something from your bio, just feel free to add to it, okay? So, Antonio E. Puente, in Spanish, Antonio E. Puente, PhD, is a professor of psychology at the University at North Carolina, Wilmington. He was born in La Habana, Cuba, emigrated to the United States in 1960. Dr. Puente received his PhD from the University of Georgia. He has taught at University of North Carolina, Wilmington since 1981. Prior to that, at St. George's University School of Medicine. His primary teaching activities include brain and behavior, clinical neuropsychology, and a history of psychology. Tony and I have been friends for many years. I've known him in the capacity of neuropsychologist. He is a former president of the Hispanic Neuropsychological Society, and I also have had the privilege of being a president of that association then. In fact, when we attended the NAN conference in Puerto Rico, you were campaigning to become president of APA at the time that I was president of HNS. I don't know if you remember that, but that was back in Puerto Rico, in Isla Verde. We were in El Conquistador, and that goes back several years. Dr. Puente is founding director of UNCW Centro Hispano, and his research focuses on the interface between culture and neuropsychology. Dr. Puente founded and edited the journals Neuropsychology Review and Journal of Interprofessional Education.
Congress lobbying on behalf of behavioral health and psychology and on a number of issues. That afternoon, I went to El Salvador to work on a forensic case down there. And unbeknownst to me, super surprise, I was arrested. And I was quarantined because 24 days before, I had been part of a lecture series in Spain, in Granada and Barcelona.
Wow.
And that night, the president of El Salvador had said, we are closing off our borders. Of course, I did not know that when I took off on the airplane. And it was the first time I discovered that this was indeed not just something that affected other people, but it came to affect me. So even though I trust I do not have the virus, I will tell you that I suffer the consequences of the virus by being essentially in jail for a day, trying to talk myself either into the country or eventually back into the U.S.
You suffered the emotional consequences. It was the emotional consequences that you suffered.
Very much so. You know, one of the things that's fascinating, and I heard this from the president of the University of Miami in Florida, who happens to be an infectious disease specialist. He says there's one thing certain about viral pandemics, and that happens to be uncertainty. In other words, there's no clear idea what's coming. Just in a week, we've unbelievably increased the number of individuals experiencing this disorder. And we wonder, how is this possible? Am I going to get it? Who has it? Should I go out? Can I buy things, including, of course, the ubiquitous toilet paper these days? Where am I to discover the facts necessary? So then we start watching CNN or Fox or whatever. We go down the internet and we cram our minds with all kinds of facts. How many people died in Iran? How many people died in Italy? And, you know, is this a man-made virus? Does this actually come from an animal? And before you know it, you've worked yourself up into an unbelievable state of anxiety And again, to go back to the president of the University of Miami, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know. This is a very difficult task for all of us. And one of the things that's fascinating, if you study anything about people's decision making, when you don't have data, you make up data. So you come to a conclusion, and that conclusion sometimes is just wrong. Like, for example, what's happening in spring break in Florida, where I have hordes of young people partying together next to each other. Or alternatively, that some people that actually get the coronavirus don't have any symptoms. So we don't really know deep down, how is it that I stand in the sea of so much uncertainty? That produces a serious stress reaction.
As much as we think we know, there's so much more that we don't know. And this is what leads to feelings of anxiety and depression, and leads to excesses of stress and panic for some people. And what we're going to talk about a little bit later is that the emotional consequences of these heightened anxiety reactions affects the body. It affects people who already may have a predisposition to having some sort of an emotional reaction, but it affects people who have physical conditions. You can imagine somebody who has hypertension. This is not exactly something that a doctor would recommend. You need to lead a stress-free existence. Or people who have problems with diabetes type 2. These kinds of stressors don't help. It affects sleep. It affects diet. It disrupts all aspects of our life. I wanted to show, to the viewers, some common kinds of reactions that I've gotten from people in slide 2. And Tony, feel free to chime in as well. So, Oscar, por favor, el segundo slide.
Okay.
These are some stories that I got actually from patients. I'm not going to go over all of them. You're probably not going to be too surprised. My patient who went to a full-size pool to do aqua therapy, and he told me that the pool was nearly empty. Another patient with children who told me his children in school were scared. Moreover, he told me that his wife, who works in a hotel, is afraid of losing her job because you don't have many people going to the hotel anymore. And on top of that, she also feared contamination. A patient who came to see me recently at one of my offices said that when she got off the elevator, she ran to the bathroom to wash her hands and sanitize her hands. Somebody was coughing in the bathroom. She ran out of the bathroom, all scared, went into an office and proceeded to apply sanitizer. So she was, pretty scared from that whole experience. I have MTA workers and transit workers who, a toll booth clerk who handles money the smart way, with gloves and chooses sanitizer. Why would you assume that it's not possible to have coronavirus on money? She works behind a glass screen, and she said to me that people slip through the money, and that one person puts the Metro card between his, in his mouth, holding the Metro card while he's fishing for money to pay for reloading the Metro card, and then gives her the Metro card. Now you can imagine how she feels about that. Most of my people, are walking around with hand sanitizers. They're washing every half hour or so. A patient of mine who flew in from Orlando told me that he was not aware of any extra precautions that the airport was taking. He said he did see some people walking around with face masks, but that was about it. A patient of mine who has this sort of like a Michael Jackson gloved person type of a penchant, always wears these thick gloves even if it's spring. And he feels that he gets some protection from the thick gloves, even though that's not accurate. But that's how he goes. A lot of people who are traveling by train, subway, they're taking 3 subways, 2 buses routinely to go to work and back. Obviously, this was before the shutdown, the major shutdown in New York City. I've had some patients tell me, yo no creo en eso. I don't believe in it. Others who are, another one who has family in Italy and was very devastated by the goings-on over there. So I also will share with you that I've had my own experiences. You know, I went to get a haircut 2 weeks ago, and 4 weeks ago I had gone, and it was no big deal. 2 weeks ago I went, and for the first time I started thinking to myself, are the scissors being contaminated? Is my hairstylist wearing gloves? Is he cleaning his hands? This 2 weeks ago, before we had as major a reaction as we have now. And I'm thinking about that. And for the first time when I left that hair salon, I did not go to the bathroom over there. I waited to go to the bathroom in my own office. Yesterday I went back, and the guy's telling me now how he's using precautions, how he's washing his hands, he's using sanitizer, 91% alcohol. So it's really interesting, you know, how the evolution of this thing and the impact. Tony, any story that you have to share besides that quasi? It was a formal arrest or a quasi arrest?
No, that was an arrest and detained for about a day.
Wow.
But I do want to point out one thing, Roy, before we go much further, is I will not have the same problem that you did going to the hairstylist, because I have a different style, entirely different. Now, having said that, one of the concerns that I see from my patients, and it alludes to the comment I said earlier about the uncertainty. When is it coming? How's it going to affect me? What should I do to prepare? And what happens is, in a standard situation like this, the patients work themselves up into a fever pitch, almost like into a panic state. And then they do things like binge buying. And for example, in the case of the toilet paper, we buy all the toilet paper that we can, or all the hamburger meat, in anticipation that the world's coming to an end. And in reality, instead of worrying like that, there are several things that we should emphasize. And they're pretty standard. We need to wash our hands regularly. Make sure you do a good job of that. Make sure you keep a distance of at least 6 feet from people. If you can avoid going places, do so. Be thoughtful about what you do and what you do. And then realize that this could be not just a week or 2 weeks, it could be longer. So let's think about this as not a stress state that we're going to find ourselves in doomsday scenario. Let's think of this as, hey, Roy, let's stop for a moment and think that this is a unique opportunity. We're so busy with life, trying to make a living, trying to raise children, trying to get a little bit further ahead, that we don't stop and say, okay, what is important? This is God's way, or nature's way, to give us the opportunity to step back for a moment and ask the question, are we doing this right? So, could we consider this not just a terrible state of affairs, a pandemic, but a challenge to each of us to try and take stock of what's important? So what do the psychologists tell us? What has the literature been published on this particular issue? Well, let me tell you some basic things. People are important to us. Meaning of what we do is important to us. Making sure that we leave a little tiny legacy for others to remember us by. So maybe the time to do is go back and say, in terms of that connectivity, who's important to us? Who have I been ignoring or not been able to attend to? Can I just take a little bit extra time for that person. Maybe my grandfather. Maybe that elderly neighbor that I don't get to see very much. In terms of the other issues, maybe it's time to stop and say, do I really need another new car? Do I really need to be working 3 jobs and not spending time with my kids at home? What is critical? Could this be, Roy, not only a challenge to our health, but a challenge to our way of being?
To our lifestyle.
Is this an opportunity?
Yeah.
What do you think?
You pretty much brought up two points that I just wanted to underscore. One was all of the fear factor, the negativity, rushing to purchase, make sure you don't run out of supplies, you don't know what's going to come tomorrow. We have a term for that we use, catastrophizing. It's a catastrophe. We tend to catastrophize. We think the worst is coming, and we behave in ways to try to protect ourselves and our bodies from doom, from the doom that you were talking about. The other thing, focusing on, do you need that new car now? What about connecting to people you haven't spoken to in a while? We're going to come out of this. This is what's called post-traumatic growth. What can you do, basically, to come ahead as a result of this? I'm trying to look at this with somewhat of a positive light. I would prefer to do it that way, and think to myself that this is a wake-up call. You've alluded to that. Basically, what is important? Connect to people. I went out of my way. I've been writing a lot about coronavirus since the boat in Japan. And I've been reaching out to people who I've lost touch with, and I've been sending them my best wishes, hope you're okay. And I was amazed at the replies that I got back. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for this. And it was like a real wonderful feeling of reconnecting with people who I had, for all practical purposes, lost contact with. And it showed me how we're all really a community. It's could be small community where we live, but we're also part of a big, large community. And it was something that, I was able to do. I'm not the world's foremost authority on technology. I can maneuver myself well enough. But clearly, the majority of our patients and viewers out there, they have smartphones and access to computers or iPads. They're familiar with social media. Nothing is really preventing modernly now from having that ability to reach out to people. ¿Someone puedes poner el tercer slide? I just briefly want to give you 2 terms. I think I mentioned both of them at the outset. I just wanted to give you a more formal definition. Pandemic. We've been hearing the word pandemic a lot, and I'm sure you've heard authorities talking about an outbreak. You've heard about an epidemic and a pandemic. So the pandemic is pretty much the most widely spread in terms of space, in terms of geographic spreading than the others. And it refers to a stage in which epidemics break out in countries and even in continents in the same time. And the new coronavirus, COVID-19, it has been classified as a pandemic. A pandemic in and of itself doesn't tell you that something is severe or not. It's just telling you how widespread it is. And a traumatic event, something that Tony and I have talked about in the past, is a major traumatic incident that causes physical, emotional, spiritual, or psychological harm. And I certainly perceive coronavirus to be the epitome of a traumatic event. I wanted to focus now a little bit on some of the vulnerable groups. We've been hearing about who's likely to get it. Puedes ponerme cuatro. We've heard that people in the general population are probably not so likely to be affected or will rebound if they do get it. But just let me remind the viewers that I'm not sure what a general population in the United States is. We're this huge melting pot. What's general? What is a general population? We have senior citizens, approximately 47 million, and it's expected that the population will soon double. We have people with chronic illnesses. Look at the number, 133 million have a chronic condition. That's almost a third of the population of the United States. People who suffer from mental illness. In the year 2018-19, almost 20% of the adult population experienced mental illness. I'm leaving out the kids. This is adults. So you had 47, almost 50 million, 1 in 5 adults. Immigrants, they are an at-risk, vulnerable population. Why? Those who are exposed to ICE raids, they're going to result in increased exposure to others. The officers also are going to be exposed to them. Some may actually, be infected. If they're detained and they're touching, well, they're going to be spreading it. If you have immigrants who are undocumented, they're not going to go out of their way to seek medical assistance because of their undocumented status. Those who do not have health insurance are not going to go out of their way to seek medical assistance either. And at the border, the risk of exposure is increased. You have people that are detained in these small confined areas, and you have the agents that are working there, that are touching them, breathing the air, coming into contact with them, and they're inter-infecting one another. So that's an at-risk population. Your people who are jailed, the locked up people that are in prisons and jails, your incarceration population. We have nearly 2.2 million adults in America's prisons and jails at the end of 2016. Many of them have risk factors. They may have illnesses. They may be in treatment. They may have undiagnosed conditions. I just heard today that there was one person in Rikers Island, an inmate, who had been found to be with coronavirus. That's one person. And they put that person, along with others who are exposed to him, in a special isolation unit at Rikers Island. The homeless, we tend to go out of our way to avoid them, walk around them. We don't think about them. They are probably the most vulnerable population around, and there's plenty of them. Over half a million nursing homes. This is where we started first getting those large numbers in Washington. Ponme cinco. I give you one more category that I thought to put here with a little diagram also. Targets of xenophobia and racism. They're experiencing social avoidance, rejection, denial of health care, education, housing, employment, and they've been recently subjected to violence because of this. I'm going to stop here. Tony, any comments on these vulnerable populations? We're going to go into the impact and then strategies for the second half of the show.
Excellent. Well, obviously, one thing that's fascinating about this pandemic and this particular virus is it doesn't seem to care of your race, of your ethnicity, of your age, per se. It affects all of us. The problem is that it seems to take advantage more of the more vulnerable folks. For example, if you're over 70, it's a big challenge. If it's over 80, a significant one. If you have cardiovascular disorders, a major problem. Diabetes, also a major problem. Now, let's add to that homelessness, poverty, discrimination because of whatever, your race or your socioeconomic status. We have then all those, and the disease, which equally affects all of us, young, old, rich, and poor, seems to really take hold and wreak havoc in the vulnerable populations. The flip side is they don't seem to have the resources. And the lack of resources keeps them from physicians, keeps them from getting tested, and maybe reaching out to others to try and provide support. So not only does it affect all of us, some of us, the more vulnerable ones, are more likely to take the strongest hit in this very, very complicated current situation.
But there's that yuck factor. Oh, you're yucky. You know, like, I don't want to look at you, treat you, stay away from me. That's existed before coronavirus. And it impacts homeless, people who've been in prisons, people who are undocumented, people of other national origins, of other cultures, other religions, this yuck factor. And it goes to show how, in some ways, there is this meanness in us. That's a topic that I tried to address at the last meeting at the last show that I had with Dr. Sharathan and Leonard Davidman, where we were talking about race hate, bias crimes. So it's something that I'm hoping also that this coronavirus, that hopefully one of the positive, even though, like I've mentioned, that we're having victims of racism even now, but I'm sort of hoping, at least among caretakers and people that are more involved in trying to take care of them, that will be a bringing us together, similar to 9/11. With 9/11, I remember we came together. We were loving one another. We said, yeah, we're American. Yeah, it doesn't matter what color I am. It doesn't matter my religion. We were attacked. We're together. And I'm sort of hoping that we could recapture that. It was really, it was as horrific as it was. I was there shortly after, and I remember that feeling of camaraderie and closeness that I haven't seen right now. And I'm really hoping that we can emerge from this more humane, with greater compassion and caring for each other. That's what I'm hoping.
We have to be careful, Roy. Those of us that identify ourselves as Hispanic, we don't want to say, esto es una cosa de Dios, que nos mandó Dios. We don't want to fall into fatalismo, that this is something that God gave us. We have to take a different approach. We have to seize the moment, attend to this, reduce the likelihood of us getting it, and realize that this may be not just a week or two or a month, it could be much longer. So we're not running a sprint here, a short distance. This could be a marathon. So what do you think, Roy, we can do to get our viewers to start thinking about, how do we turn this in from a catastrophe and a pandemic to an opportunity? How can we grow, not from just the experience, but we can get better? Post-traumatic growth is what you mentioned. What tips do you think we can give our folks here listening to us, how they can improve their lives as a function of this crisis? What opportunity could occur with this crisis?
Well, we have a good 25 or more minutes left before Oscar yanks me off stage, and we're going to get into that. So, Oscar, por favor, slide 6. Let's talk. We're going to talk about the impact, some precautions that you already mentioned, and then we're going to really put a lot of effort into coping. So, ponme el 6. So here, if you look at impact, and I don't pretend that this necessarily covers everything that's out there, but I tried to summarize as best I could to make this workable and viewable. By the way, to the viewers, you know that the show's being recorded, Tribuna TV, YouTube, it'll be available. It's already being recorded on YouTube Live. It'll be available tomorrow, YouTube, Tribuna TV, Facebook. Feel free to take screenshots. Copy it, look it over at your leisure, print these particular slides. We've seen price gouging. We've already been warned about it. We've also been hearing now about scams. people taking advantage of senior citizens, calling them up with all sorts of promises to help them or to provide them with supplies for coronavirus. I've heard of people going to doors, knocking on the door, saying that they were there to inspect something. And today I heard that a person or two people, they went to the door in a private house and said that they were there for the U.S. Census Bureau. So you have to really be careful of those scams. We've already heard about shortages. I'm not going to elaborate too much on that. There's shortages of hospital beds, major disruptions in supply chains of medicine and some of the things that we're so accustomed to. We've seen a lot of closings. Because of the social distancing, it has led us and the need to sort of self-quarantine. We already had to forego St. Patrick's Day. Weddings are being canceled. Graduations won't be held. It doesn't mean the kids won't graduate, but they're not going to walk the stage, collect their diploma, and have a graduation party or prom. First Communion is like May, and end of April, early May. What's going to happen with the kiddies who have been rehearsing for, I think, 2 years for First Communion? We have many religious holidays coming up, Passover, Easter. There are Islamic holidays, Hindu holidays, Buddhist holidays. Mother's Day, May 10th. Of course, people can recognize and celebrate their mother, but it's not going to be by going to a nice restaurant. So this is what I mean by the major disruptions and closings. Flight and travel restrictions, you've already heard this. Quarantine, voluntary, mandatory. Isolation, we have already talked about. It has significant mental health and physical health reactions, results. Emotional reactions, we've talked about this. Tony has alluded to it. What must it feel like to the person who hears that he or she must be quarantined? What did it feel like for Tony in El Salvador to be told that he couldn't fly and that he was being arrested? Now, he's a very experienced, competent psychologist, and I'm sure he had the ability and skill to withstand this, but nonetheless, he's a human being too. We're all reacting to this. What does it feel like to kids not to go to school, not to go to work? What about the financial fear? What am I going to do to survive economically? Fear of safety of your loved ones, especially if you have elderly ones or loved ones who have some sort of a medical or mental condition. How about people coping with the loss of loved ones because of the coronavirus? People who are victimized by racial hate, bias, and racist aggression. People, the actual victims themselves, what are they feeling like? At the bottom, I put fear. You already talked about it, Tony. I'm just re-emphasizing it. Fear of the unknown. We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And what we think we know, chances are we don't know, because it could be misinformation or incorrect. We're also getting bombarded, so it's overwhelming news, so we get information that becomes garbled and we're not sure what's accurate and what's not accurate. The great former president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, stated, and I wanted to give you that quote, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." So I think we have to fear a little bit more than fear itself, because, the coronavirus does have its physical consequences, but the emphasis here is on the fear. Ponme el slide 7. We're going to focus on some of the precautions, Tony, and then I'm going to get into the coping, and I'm going to ask you to take it away with the coping. I did want to acknowledge one of my guests from the last show, Dr. Sharis, and her mother, who is a biologist, retired and cell biologist, was kind enough to offer some assistance in telling me about coronavirus and some of the kinds of things and what it is, and it was fairly technical. So I'm sparing that. But what Tony already mentioned, wash your hands thoroughly with soap. They're telling kids and people, if you're not sure what 20 seconds is, sing happy birthday 2 times. If you're bored with that, there's other things you could sing, I'm sure. Use a hand sanitizer, contains at least 60% alcohol. If you're sick, you've been hearing this, stay home. Cover your mouth when you're coughing. Clean and disinfect surfaces and items that are frequently used. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Tony, anything to add to this? Por favor, Oscar, me pones el ocho.
Just follow common sense, basic sanitary process. But, when you do this, it gets tedious. What if you were to run out of sanitizer? What if you really social distance yourself? What if you self-quarantine? Then you start getting boredom. You start thinking all these terrible thoughts. We want to make sure that you replace those things with routines, with activities, opportunities that you haven't had to been able to address because you've been so busy. So what can we tell them, Roy? What are some specific things we can tell them to not only fend off this catastrophe thinking, but seize the opportunity to improve your lot?
Let's look at some of these coping techniques, and I'm going to want your big help here on this one. I follow the news a lot. When I'm seeing patients and I have a full day of work, I'm not. I may get pop-ups on my cell phone that I tend to ignore. And I must tell you that on those days that I have a full house of patients and I'm not zeroed in on the news, it's like a relief. It's almost like we become, putting aside coronavirus, it's almost like we are so dependent on our cell phones for information feed that we get nonstop, including the chirons at the bottom, where you're getting, the news feed all the time and you're getting bombarded with news. Put away your cell phone for a day or two. See if you could last. See the effect it would have on you. But it's like a delight not focusing so much on it. But it's my business to look at news and analyze it because I'm in a profession that I do a lot of forensic work and a lot of writing. But for viewers, for the people out there, you need to decrease this toxic exposure. My own recommendation is that you can get all the news you need, 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, 10 minutes at the end of the day at night. Anything else about coronavirus at this point in time is going to be really overly toxic. Exceptions, clearly, if there's breaking news or something that's really of significant importance that comes. But as a general rule of thumb, really try to cut down on the exposure. Become very familiar with the precautions. We've talked about them a lot. A lot of self-education. Educate yourself about coronavirus and about other things, about proper hygiene. It doesn't just have to be coronavirus. Now's the time to educate yourself around other kinds of things. Create a contact list. It's good to have something that you can problem solve with or that you can rely on resources. So it's not just people that you know or maybe people a little bit more distant, but organizations that can offer assistance, phone numbers and addresses, emails, things like that. So you have it readily available. Put it on your refrigerator, put it in your phone, stuff that you really need access to immediately. Examine what mitigation strategies are most viable when you're given your situation. A mitigation means something that you can do to help ease your situation, to help make it better. This requires problem solving. And Tony, you've been alluding to what are some of the things that we can do. Well, with problem solving in general, you have to identify what the issues are. So for me, I can't work now because I've been told I can't go to the restaurant. My employer is not paying me a salary. So for me, this is a problem. I'm not at work. I'm stuck home. I have children who are home from school, and I don't have an income. What do I have in the bank? Do I need to borrow money? What are some of the avenues I can take? What are the possible solutions that exist for you? There's always solutions. Even though you're not thrilled with the solutions, there's always solutions. You need to evaluate the options, pick the best option that you have, go for it, weigh in on the efficacy of it, and make modifications as needed. We've talked about keeping an eye on other people, loved ones, friends, colleagues. I mentioned patients who might be vulnerable. What are their needs? How can you assist, support one another? What are some of the things that you can do? With children, limit access to news media also. This was common advice after 9/11. These kids were looking at those towers, go down. Every 5 minutes a tower was falling after 9/11. That's horrific. Limit access to that. Limit that exposure. You need to provide structure. Tony was talking about providing structure, our structure. We need to provide structure with the children to give them reassurance, give them simple explanations about what coronavirus is so that they're not left in the dark, and basically the reassurance that you, mommy or daddy, are there and you're taking care of them, and that there are people there who are helping and taking care of mommy and daddy too. Offer reassurance. Educational activities for the children. Homeschooling, online education. Try to connect with others. Like I mentioned some of the things that I did myself by reaching out to people who I hadn't been in touch with for a long time. Relax. In this show, we've talked about relaxation strategies many times. Deep breathing, meditation, hypnosis. There's many things. Exercise. Keep yourself in shape. If you're going to be home more, if you're quarantined, you're staying in, you're social distancing more, you have to do some exercise. Watch your nutrition. Watch movies, comedies, read. Play games with your kids, even video games with your kids. Learn new skills. This is a great time to learn stuff that you said, I'd like to learn this, and you never have the time to do it. Now's the time to do it. Listen to music. You have to monitor that negative thinking, that catastrophic thinking. Oh my God, this is horrible. You might as well pack it in if it's that bad. You don't really want to let it get that bad. Tony, I'm done with this, so please take it away.
Well, along those lines, I think you've emphasized several things over and over again. Let's emphasize it one more time. Connect with others. Make structure. Make routines. Expand your horizons. Make sure that you don't get into the catastrophic thinking. And let's also not forget, Roy, that if I am in a financially difficult situation, if the stock market's affecting me, well, guess what? It's affecting everyone else. So it's not like you've been singled out. All of us are in this mess together. And all of us together will get us out. So let's not focus on its entire negative side. Let's do what we can to avoid getting the disease. Let's do what we can to get better if we do get the disease. And most of all, let's take this as an opportunity to see what we can do to improve our lot, because we haven't had an opportunity. We get on the treadmill, we just go every single day. This is our one time that God and nature has given us to stop for a moment, take stock of our lives, because this will not last forever. What are we going to do when it's all over? Can we take a moment to restructure our life, to make sure that when it's all over, we're much better off than we were before it all started? Can we do that, Roy?
I think it's somewhat silly. Yes, the answer is yes. and I encourage everybody to. And the reality is that we can. I mean, as grim and as horrific things might seem, you have life, and life is a gift. And there always are solutions. And if you alone, on your own, are not sure, reach out to others for help. Other people may see things you don't see. We have blind spots. We have blinders when we're not sure. We tend to only see one thing, and then sometimes an innocent voice, the voice of a child, tells us something, and you think, wow, I didn't hear that. A 10-year-old child said, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. 10 years old. What a wonderful learning from a 10-year-old. So you have other people around you who can help you. Another thing that I will say is that as grim as I thought things were in terms of broadcasting. There was always the numbers, the statistics. This is bad. It's reaching here. It's going to get worse before it gets better. It reached a point that really turned me off. And I said, I don't want to hear this anymore. I want to emancipate myself from that. So one of the things that I am delighted is that more and more I'm seeing stores now reaching out, sending emails, saying, just to let you know, we're washing all the surfaces. We're doing this. We're trying to take care of you. We're requesting more supplies. We're giving the first hour of the morning to senior citizens so they can come and they get first crack at shopping. More and more I see people, communities, coming together and trying to give messages that are more reassuring. And I'm delighted. I really am delighted to see that. It does show that there is a coming together, and I just hope that continues to grow as well. There seems to be some indication that maybe there's a malaria immunization that might provide or might have some use, but it certainly does look like we have brilliant minds, brilliant scientists and microbiologists and epidemiologists all over the world acting on this like probably no one else has ever done this much together. And hopefully we will have solutions, hopefully, more quickly than initially we were being led to believe. So that's pretty much how I'm seeing it. And I do see light at the end of the tunnel. I tend to be the type of person with my own patients that I ask them to do problem solving and look for solutions. And anything that's even a little bit more positive is certainly better than nothing, or better than going backwards. And that kind of a voice. I called it a silver lining. Years ago I said, wow, silver lining. I really came to like that term. I'm age-wise, not a spring chicken. I've had my share of medical issues, and I like to think that there are really good things and that life is a gift. So this is an attitude that I'm trying to share with all my viewers.
Roy, can I share a story about one of my former students? I'll name her first name, Julia. Julia just finished getting a PhD from the University of Granada. And I talked to her this week and I said, Julia, what are you doing with yourself? Because you are basically self-quarantined. The whole country is self-quarantined. What are you doing? And she says, I love to dance. And I'm pretty good at salsa, but I'm not so good at bachata. And I don't know how to do swing. So I've downloaded every single YouTube that I can get, and I am working several hours a day, not only to be a good psychologist, but also to become a great dancer. So she's got that silver lining and turned it into a reality. We hope that all of you will
That's great.
do your very best to avoid the disease, fight it if you get it, but more importantly, seize this opportunity and learn how to dance bachata.
Do a dance, sing. I would encourage people to write. I mean, and I don't mean that like you're writing necessarily essays or professionally, but nothing's preventing you from writing a journal, jotting down what you did, what your thoughts were, what your experiences were, so that you have something 10 years from now you can look back at and say, wow, I wrote this. Or you leave a legacy. My sister, who's a little bit older than me, and she's a medical doctor, she works with senior citizens. My father passed away many years ago. He was from Spain, de España, Valenciano, and he wrote beautifully. Just yesterday, I got in the mail from her a letter that had a photo of my father and me from a long time ago. And on the back, she wrote two of my favorite guys. And she sent me a 15-page little article, like from a diary that my father wrote in 1965 when he and I, on our own, traveled to Puig in Spain. And I was sitting there reading it, and I had never seen this. I had never seen this, and I was 1965. So gracias, papi. So his legacy, in a way, lives on by doing that. So I encourage people: you get bored, right? You do something. Don't overeat. Watch your diet. Watch your sleep. This is the time to really take care of yourself. We're going to look at some resources now before we wrap up. So slide 9. I did want to give the viewers, a shot at, you're already familiar with many of these, but I've organized them, I think, pretty neatly for you. World Health Organization at the top, Centers for Disease Control underneath that. I've given you the links to the internet. New York State Department of Health, wonderful information there. New York City Health, underneath that, I've also given you the link. Johns Hopkins University Medicine, one of the top hospitals, medical schools in the country. Link there. Live tracking, if you really want to keep an eyeball on where and when and the spread, and you're really into that, that's where you go for the live tracking. Dashboard also gives you up-to-date analyses of the coronavirus. SAMHSA, underneath that, alcohol, the drugs, addiction. They have wonderful resources. And as I've done before, as a psychologist, I feel obligated, since I'm in New York State, to give you some indication. If you are worried about the mental health of somebody because of this or despite this, New York State Psychological Association, there's the link. APA, Tony, you will recognize that. That's the broader parent organization, American Psychological Association. And of course, every state has its own psychological organization under the APA. And there's many that are not part of the APA, that are psychiatric or nursing or counselors or mental health professionals, pastoral counselors, that you can rely on. I don't just want to lock it into my own profession. There's many people out there who can help.
Roy, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure. Puedes sacar el slide.
Relying on Facebook or other sources like that, are these good, reliable sources for factual information, or could they get me in trouble by giving me, as we've labeled in recent months, fake news?
I would really be very cautious about social media. Because, it's not, as you know, it hasn't been all that wonderfully regulated until maybe recently. They're taking closer looks at it. But even if you look at elections and electioneering, there's been stuff that you've wondered about, and you also wonder who has access to it, whether or not there's some people that are really trolling it and using it inappropriately. So I would steer clear of that. If you have friends and contacts that are in social media, by all means. But I would be cautious in terms of believing information you get there, and in being overly willing to expose your own personal or professional information to some aspects of social media, and go instead to the real links, to CDC, to Johns Hopkins, to other places, a World Health Organization. Go directly to their links. If you get stuff in the email that's asking you for donations and money, probably disregard it. It could be a scam. Don't click anything, because they could certainly infect your computer. That would be the best advice or recommendation that I can give in that regard. Tony, do you have any contact information that you would like the viewers to know about you, how they can reach you if they wanted to touch base with you?
Certainly. Well, they're welcome to reach me at Puente at uncw.edu. Puente at uncw.edu. Pueden escribir en español, or you can write in English. Take your pick. I'd be happy to answer your questions, your concerns, or give you some additional websites that you may be able to go dig for information. Now, the task is not getting more information. The task is rising to the occasion, avoiding the disease, fighting it, and then coming out of all of this a much better person than you were before it all started. So I personally wish you and all your viewers the very best as we go into very uncharted territories. And hopefully, when we come out, we're in much better shape as a person, as a community, as a nation than we were when we started this.
This almost reminds me of stress inoculation that I learned many years ago down on Meikenbaum. But you identify the problem. How do you know that you are angry? I mean, how do you feel it? How do you know it? Do you get a message in your head? Are you aware of feeling angry? What do you do about it? How do you react to it? What's your decision? What's the result? Where along the chain were you able to interrupt it before it got more difficult? Before it became more catastrophic, and then you weigh in on, well, how did it work? Like at the end, and I think that's fine here. You know what the problem is. You know what you have to do. You have to take care of yourself, those around you. You know that you're in for it for a while. You have to do the best that you can. We've given you many suggestions. You have many resources. You can contact me, Dr. Puente. We will get through. We will get through. I sincerely hope that the show has been of benefit to all the viewers. Deseo que todos hayan sacado algún provecho de esto. My heart goes out to all of you. I really feel for you, and I hope that you are all safe. Tony, un abrazo de distancia. So thank you so much for coming. You are a wonderful, well-educated, solidly knowledgeable, and calming voice of authority to the viewers. Oscar, saludos a ti también. Espero que tú estés bien. And without that, do you have any final goodbyes or anything for the viewers?
I wish you the very best. Buena suerte. Together we can, and together we will.
Okay. So el show ya está grabado. Lo tendrán acceso mañana. Les veo el próximo jueves. I will see you next Thursday. We have a completely different kind of show for next Thursday. And I will keep you all posted. So un abrazo a todos. My best greetings to all of you, and I hope all of us are well. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Good night.
Buenas noches.